400. That's the number of distributions born from Debian over the years. 120 of them are still alive today. They get updates, they have a website, they have a real community. The other 280 are dead. Some died after one release, others lasted 6 months, until the one developer behind them found a real job and stopped answering issues on GitHub. Look at DistroWatch today. Almost 2/3 of the active distributions it tracks come from Debian, or from Ubuntu, which itself comes from Debian. That's not a fun fact for a nerd dinner party. That's a cultural monopoly. Nobody ever sat down and designed it. It built itself, package by package, over more than 30 years. The question I keep asking myself is not why Debian succeeded. Everyone already knows that answer. The real question is different. Why do so many people feel the need to take it? Change the theme, change the wallpaper, change the name, call it a brand new project, instead of just using Debian as it is. And more than that, where did all of these distributions actually end up? You don't need a doctorate to understand the mechanism. Debian gives you tens of thousands of packages, already tested. It gives you tools like debootstrap and live build, tools that automate most of the work of building a custom live image. The policy manual is public, detailed to the point of obsession. Follow the recipe and you get a bootable ISO in a weekend. The heavy lifting is already done. The packaging, the security work, the hardware compatibility, someone else did it for you. The result? Publishing a new Linux distribution is now within reach of almost anyone with a free weekend. And plenty of people have tried it. For the strangest reasons you can imagine. Religious faith, national pride, a cartoon, a hobby, an overclocking algorithm, or simply the desire to see your own name in an OS release file. The catalog that came out of 30 years of this is honestly one of the most absurd corners of the entire Linux ecosystem, and one of the most underrated. Before we go into the graveyard, 1 minute for the other side of the coin. Just to set a baseline, Ubuntu overtook its parent in visibility. Canonical put a predictable 6-month release cycle on top of it. Commercial support too. Something Debian, by its own governance choices, could never offer. Kali Linux exists for one mission only: penetration testing, hundreds of security tools, maintained by a dedicated team. Raspberry Pi OS answers a real hardware constraint. Tails answers a real need for anonymity, with precise technical choices behind it. Devuan was born from a real fracture, technical and ideological, over the adoption of Systemd, not from an aesthetic whim, a clear mission, a real technical constraint, or execution so careful it justifies the project on its own. Keep that in mind, because now we're entering the part where almost none of these projects meet any of the three. Let's start with the most documented chapter, the religious derivatives. Ubuntu Christian Edition offered Bible reading software, prayer tools, Bible study applications, and a content filter aimed at Christian families. Sibeli did the same work for the Muslim community. Prayer time tools, Quran reading, built right in. There was also a version for the Jewish community, distributed informally as Jubuntu, with the Torah in Hebrew pre-installed. Almost all of them stopped after a handful of releases, leaving behind nothing but an abandoned website. On the opposite end, ideologically speaking, Ubuntu Satanic Edition, a dark theme from boot to desktop, themed wallpapers, a bundle of pre-installed metal music, presenting itself as the meeting point between free software and extreme culture. It's been frozen for years, on its last published version, based on an Ubuntu release that's ancient by now. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you already know Hannah Montana Linux, a Kubuntu build, themes, splash screens, wallpapers, all dedicated to the Miley Cyrus TV show. Released in 2008, never touched again after a couple of releases. Probably still the single most cited example. Whenever people talk about derivatives born from an inside joke, here the story gets more serious, and honestly, more interesting. Newline X is a Debian-based distribution, created by the regional government of Extremadura in Spain, built to spread free software through local schools and public administration. It inspired Guadalinux, the sister project from the regional government of Andalusia, which split into 5 separate editions. One for schools, one for elderly centers, one for public libraries, one stripped down for old computers, and one built specifically for the Guadalinfo centers. The free internet access points in rural Andalusia. Guadalinux moved from a Debian base to an Ubuntu base, starting with version 3, and was officially discontinued by the regional government in 2018 after 14 years of life. A similar case on the other side of the Atlantic. Huayra, a Debian-based distribution developed by the Argentine government, part of a national program handing laptops to public school students. The name comes from a Quechua word. It means wind. Thousands of real machines, in the hands of real students, for a project almost nobody outside Argentina has ever heard of. This is my favorite category, because there's no irony here, just a very narrow technical need that somebody decided to solve by building an entire distribution, instead of just installing 2 packages on regular Debian. Distro Astro launched in 2013 for amateur astronomers, a Mate desktop. Software like Cartes du Ciel and K-Stars pre-installed, for mapping the night sky, for controlling motorized telescopes, discontinued for years now. But for a while it had a real community, people who genuinely used it to watch the stars. DebWRT, released in 2009, tried to bring the entire Debian packaging system inside home routers, apt included, residential gateways too, a territory usually ruled by OpenWrt. It lasted about a year and a half of public development. Then it stopped. Overclockix, a Debian build optimized for people who overclock their hardware. Stress testing tools, monitoring tools, pre-installed. On a GNOME 3 desktop, Web Converger went the opposite direction. It threw away almost the entire idea of a desktop and used Debian to build a kiosk system. For information totems, for digital signage, running only a lockdown Firefox. On top of a minimal window manager called DWM, it stayed active for almost a decade, from 2007 to 2016, before being shut down. CAE Linux, built for computer-aided engineering, simulation tools, mechanical design tools, packed onto a Debian Live DVD, exactly the kind of niche distribution that 99% of the people watching this video have never heard of. And that's exactly the point. Musix, born in Argentina, derived from a branch of Knoppix, which itself comes from Debian, built for audio and video production, on free hardware. An entire suite of music recording tools, already configured, made for musicians who didn't want to spend weeks compiling low-latency audio drivers. And then there's Symphony OS, based on Ubuntu. It tried to recreate the interface of the long-dead BOS, an operating system from the 1990s, one that anticipated several design ideas later picked up elsewhere. It kept getting small updates for years, eventually becoming, in practice, a working tribute to an operating system that no longer exists. Parsix, French, Debian-based, a live and install DVD, built to be ready to use out of the box. No configuration marathon, just boot it and go. It survived for years quietly without ever becoming a headline. Then in 2016 it stopped. No dramatic announcement, no farewell post. The site just stopped updating. One more name for the list of distributions that did everything right, technically, and still ended up forgotten. CrunchBang deserves its own chapter, because it tells us something the other dead derivatives don't. What happens when a community actually falls in love with a project? Built on Debian, with OpenBox, instead of a full desktop environment, it became a small cult favorite, for people who wanted something light and minimal, without giving up a bit of visual polish. When its creator announced the end of the project in 2015, saying simply that his work on it was done, part of the community refused to let go and built a direct successor, carrying the same philosophy forward under a different name. Probably the only case in this entire catalog where the death of a derivative didn't mean the death of the idea behind it. Most derivatives change the paint job. A few tried to change the entire room. Symphony OS is the clearest example. Originally built on Knoppix, later rebased on Debian Stable, it didn't just swap a theme. It threw out the desktop metaphor completely. No folders pretending to be a desk. No nested start menu, 3 levels deep. Instead, a custom interface called Mezzo, written in Perl and GTK2 WebKit, running on top of the lightweight FVWM window manager. 4 fixed targets on screen. System, programs, files, trash, everything you needed, one click away, always in the same place. The idea came from something its founders called a gray paper, their own manifesto on interface design, arguing that the desktop metaphor, borrowed from paper offices in the 1970s, was never actually designed for how people use computers now. It's a genuinely interesting idea, and for a few years Symphony OS had real press coverage, real reviews, a real following, people curious about a different way to interact with a Linux desktop. The last beta came out in 2015, then nothing. No sequel, no spiritual successor, no fork picking up where it left off. Just a website, still technically online, describing a desktop paradigm that almost nobody ever got to try. Not every minor derivative is dead, and not every living one is famous. Ubuntu is a Debian stable build, with XFCE or LXQT, made specifically for refurbished computers, destined for humanitarian organizations. The goal? Extending the life of used hardware, cutting down on electronic waste. Nitrux takes Debian, puts KD Plasma on top, replaces systemd with OpenRC, ships applications mostly as app images instead of traditional packages, runs a Liquorix kernel tuned for responsiveness. Spiral Linux, even more recent, a set of Debian spins, built to be as independent as possible from the upstream project, additions for almost every desktop environment you can think of, and a tool that lets you build your own custom version. And then there's Canotix, one of the oldest Debian derivatives still standing, started in 2003 by a developer known only as Cano. Originally inspired by Knoppix, built around one obsession: hardware detection. Getting Linux to recognize your Wi-Fi card, your graphics chip, your weird laptop touchpad automatically without you touching a config file. It went quiet for years, resurfaced, went quiet again, and yet as of right now, it's still releasing. A rolling release based on Debian stable, with nightly builds pulling in the newest packages. More than 20 years of history, and most Linux users today have never heard the name. All of these are active projects, maintained, downloadable today. And yet none of them ever show up on any top 10 distros list, because none of them ever had a real communication machine behind them. The difference between these and the 300 dead distributions we talked about earlier, it's not the quality of the technical work. Most of the time, it's just luck or stubbornness from whoever kept maintaining them year after year without giving up. There's one more category. Almost nobody treats it as its own, but I think it deserves to be one. Distributions that catalogs and Wikipedia pages still mark as active, an official website still online, but the last published package, years old. Nobody ever formally declared them dead, because nobody ever bothered writing a shutdown announcement. But in practice, nobody updates them anymore. Nobody answers a security report, and nobody would seriously build a daily driver on top of one. Not dead enough to make the official list of discontinued distributions. Not alive enough to deserve any real trust. It's a kind of limbo, and if you think about it, it tells you more about the fuzzy line between still exists and only exists on paper than any other example in this catalog. Once you look at enough of these, a pattern shows up. Almost every dead derivative dies the exact same way. Step 1. One person, sometimes two, start the project out of pure enthusiasm. Step 2. The first release gets a burst of attention, a distro watch listing, a Reddit thread, maybe a YouTube review. Step 3. Real users start showing up, and with them, real requests. Bug reports, feature requests, a driver that doesn't work on someone's laptop. Step 4. The maintainer realizes that building the first ISO was the fun part, and maintaining it forever for free is a second unpaid job. Step 5. Updates slow down, then stop. The forum keeps running for a while because forums are cheap to host. The download link keeps working until the hosting bill doesn't get paid, and eventually the domain itself expires and gets bought by a squatter or simply disappears. No obituary, no final commit that says goodbye. Just a slow fade until a page like this one, on a channel like this one, is the only place that still remembers the name. That pattern isn't unique to Debian derivatives. It's the pattern of almost every small open source project ever built. Debian just happens to be the base that makes starting the story so easy that we get to watch this exact same ending play out 400 separate times. It's worth asking why. Even though almost all of these stories end the same way, people keep building derivatives destined to die within a few months. I don't think it's just laziness or vanity. Even though both play a role, there's something deeper in free software culture. The ability to take a project and modify it freely is treated as an almost sacred right, and it should be. It's the only real safeguard against the authoritarian drift of a single maintainer or a single company. But a right, exercised without a plan behind it, produces almost every time the same result. A repository with 3 commits, an excited announcement on a forum, then silence. There's also a simpler reason, and it's less flattering. Building something from scratch is hard. Terrifying even. But forking something that already works feels safe. You get a working system on day one. You get to skip the hardest 10% of the work, and you get to tell yourself and everyone else that you built an operating system, which technically isn't even a lie. It's just not the whole truth either. Building a Linux distribution today is technically easier than it has ever been. Maintaining it is not. Keeping it secure, answering bug reports, updating packages every time Debian ships a new point release. Exactly as hard as it's always been. And that gap between how easy it is to start and how hard it is to survive is where the real difference lives. Between Ubuntu's still alive after more than 10 years and the dozens of TV show tribute distros that never made it past their third release. Put all of these stories together and they tell you one thing, the exact same technical base. The same apt, the same DPKG, the same package archive can turn in different hands into a digital telescope, an advertising kiosk, a router, a religious symbol, a joke about a teen star, or a tool for humanitarian aid. No other software project in the history of computing has been bent toward such a wide range of uses, serious and ridiculous at the same time, while still keeping a recognizable technical core under every single mask. And that's exactly why the blunt verdict, 90% of these derivatives make no sense, needs to sit next to a second thought, one that's less comfortable to put in a YouTube title. The fact that they had no future doesn't mean they had no real user, no real problem solved. However small, for as long as they existed, most of them simply didn't have the legs, the community, or the persistence to outlast the first wave of enthusiasm. And that gap between the ease of starting something and the difficulty of keeping it alive for years remains the only real difference between a forgotten curiosity on a Wikipedia page and a project someone will still be using 10 years from now. That's the real lesson of this whole catalog. Not 90% of these are a joke, but 90% of these needed more than good code to survive. And that's a much harder problem to solve than writing a kernel module. One more thing before we close. Somewhere out there right now, someone is opening a terminal, typing dbootstrap, starting distro number 401. Maybe it becomes the next MX Linux. Maybe it becomes the next Hannah Montana Linux. Statistically, you already know which one is more likely. But that's exactly why the 10% matters so much. Because somebody at some point refused to be the 90. See you in the next video, and may Linux be with you.